Hi, everyone. Welcome to Turning Point. I'm your host, Blaine Birch, co-founder and CEO at Dryrun, where we'll help you forecast your cash flow model scenarios and truly understand the state of your finances. And I'm really excited to have joining me today, Zach Coleman with GymMark. And he comes from the creative agency land, which I know if you've seen other episodes, you know I had an agency for over a decade. So I love talking agency stuff before I dove into software. So thanks for coming on the show, Zach.
Thank you for having me on.
And, we always love to get started on the show by let's go right back to the beginning. When was the first time you started to get that entrepreneurial bug?
I would actually say, I mean, if we want to go way back, my parents somewhat had an entrepreneur journey themselves. I think that kind of, they had their own store. I remember growing up and on the weekends, I'd go in the store and play video games. My dad was one of the top spa salesmen in the country, started to go around and, before the day of the internet, started to go around and like consult and help other places do selling. And so I think I kind of grew up with it, but I think that there was around a time I remember being an agency owner, I think that we all dabbled in freelance a little bit. And I remember in the corporate world, there was this pivotal point. I moved my way up into the corporate world quite fast. I thought I was job hopping at the time to make more money. Didn't really realize until later on it was because I learned everything I could possibly learn and I wanted to move on. And I was working for, I worked for the Phoenix Suns for about 2 years, thought it was my dream job. It was my way of trying to push into the NFL. And I just got to a point about 2 to 3 years, working with them that I kind of felt like I needed to move on. And from there, I kind of went to Pearson Education. There was a little bit of a timeline in between there with another job, but I moved up to creative director over at Pearson Education. And I remember that I was about 2 years into that gig. And I remember just being at the point where I was doing twice as much as everyone else and still only working like 5-6 hours a day. And I was like, I can't work any slower than this, man. Like I can't, I'm not even like trying. And I just always worked freelance on the side. I always had a passion for sports. I always had a passion for athletics. And I remember around the year 2014, funny, about 10 years ago, I was working there and I always dabbled. I always felt like I had to go out and look for other jobs all the time. I didn't feel intimidated by going and talking. And I had my first freelance job come up for American Express to fly out to New York City. It was always my passion to work there and, got offered a gig to kind of work on their user experience and they were going to fly me out. They were going to pay me literally probably about $100 a year. And at that time I was only, I was like 28 years old. And it was only going to be a 6-month contract. So I was like, oh yes, this is it. They're going to pay for my hotel. It was a dream. It was a dream. Yep. I ended up turning it down. Because I was scared. I was nervous. And it was that fear of, oh, well, what am I going to do after that 6 months? And I remember about a day later how much regret I felt for not taking it. So I ended up emailing them back being like, hey, is this still available? And they already gave it to somebody else. But that failure in itself on not taking that, I think was my guiding factor myself to be like, I think it's time that I have to move on. I have to go and I have to, that fear actually guided me to, be like, oh, well, maybe I just have to make the leap and go out on my own. So it's like I took an even bigger risk, but I did, do it a little smart. I had some freelance stuff on the side, didn't really make that much from it. Wasn't a huge factor, probably making about 10 a year from it. So 10K a year. So it wasn't that much. But I just knew and I said, all right, I'm going to wait until I hit this certain mark at this company. I've already saved up from freelance over the years. It just kind of sat there about 30K. And I'm like, I can live off this for a year. So I waited until my two year mark. And then of course I gave it another 2 weeks because I was too nervous to give my farewell, but then I did it. And I remember that first car ride home after that. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is interesting. I'm like, I actually have more control than I thought. It's like, it was a weird dynamic that can only happen, I feel like, once you're actually on your own, because I was like, I actually could have gotten let go at any time, which funny enough, the Pearson was going through this weird strike situation, where bringing in more management, doing more stuff. And they were taking all the seniors, and one by one, they were giving them strikes so they could start paying the juniors higher. So I was last on the list already. So it kind of already helped push me out the door. But I realized, I'm like, I had more risk of losing a job there than I do owning my own thing. And so I'm like, I can do this better. I can do this better. And so I went out and I took that leap. I think at that point I had a freelance gig for $35 an hour for making through a friend that I just worked for him for like months, trading my time for money for that first 6, 7, 8 months of owning the business. But it slowly started to take off, and I'm not saying my business is perfect. There's lots of pain points, lots of failures, lots of shifts still, but at the end of the day, it's what led me to where I am now.
Well, and that's, it's such a familiar story. Like, I've had other creative agency owners on the show. And I owned one for over a decade as well. And that same thing, it's kind of like, well, I'm just going to dive out on my own. And it was the same realization. It's funny because they had the exact same realization. I'm like, well, now I can always make a buck, and I'm not capped. I'm not capped at my salary. I can make way more. But I'm also can always make a buck, and they can let me go at any time. And that realization was like for me, I started doing sort of that, really doing a lot more freelance, and left my sort of first job. It was 1999, maybe early 2000. I think it was 99 when I left, and I haven't looked back since. And it's just, ups and downs. And of course, everything always looks great from the outside. No, it's hard. Business is hard. Especially now, it's really hard. We talk with business owners every day. It's a hard time out there right now. But I don't know, there's something built into entrepreneurs where they just kind of keep slugging and keep growing. Right.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm not going to lie. I go through my days where I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. And it's like, I call it the business depressions, where it's like one day I'm on top of the world, and the next day I'm like, yeah, I just need to take a day off and relax. I mean, I think that's common. But overall, I wouldn't have or be at a place where I am now if I didn't, go off on my own.
Yeah, exactly. A friend of mine, he said one time, this is probably 15, 20 years ago, it was funny. He goes, man, one day we think we're going to buy an island because we're doing so well. And he goes, the next day, I think I'm going to be living in a box in the alley. Like, yeah, that's just about it, right?
Well, what do they say? You see like Warren Buffett or any of the large ones, and they still, the multi-billionaires, and they still feel like it could all end like tomorrow. Like, so it is, and I have to tell my wife all the time, like, she's like, why do you always have to go after more clients? Why do you always have to try to grow? It's like, it's not that I'm trying to grow. It's just that I could lose a client at any time, no matter how much I try to do value or try to do certain things. And so just to try to stay stagnant, I have to push, which I think is by far my biggest cringe word is staying stagnant, but overall, like it's tough. And I personally really try to push a different demeanor when I'm out on social media, because I feel like a lot of people see these $1 million gurus or like flashy cars. I'm like, I'll be the first to tell you, like, money is not a success factor for me anymore. Like, yes, money and top line's important, but like in bottom line, but at the end of the day, like, I got there, I don't need money anymore. And I mean, I do, I need to survive, but like my family now is important, and my being present around myself and working on myself tends to be a much bigger premise for success for me at this moment in time.
Yeah, it's extremely rare that we have an entrepreneur on the show. Or I even talk with an entrepreneur that got into it for money. And if they got in just for money, it's usually a bit of a harder slog. And even the ones that were a bit successful, I think the same thing is later on they discovered, you know what, it really wasn't about the money. I thought it was at the time, but it really wasn't. It's this, it seems to be this balance of, really wanting to build something and grow something,
Mhm.
but also having this self-determination, and all these other elements that come into it. Of course, you got to make money, got to pay the
Yeah.
bills, got to pay the team, got to, but um, that's rarely the driving force. And I think I think it'd be a little bit miserable if it was the driving force. And I think, I think my belief is I think it'd be harder to be successful if that's your driving force.
I
So
think it
I
is
think
too.
it's,
And funny enough, I think we see it every day. I mean, I think social media has kind of pushed out this whole transactional type environment. I mean, you owned an agency before. You probably had to deal with scope creep and
oh,
deal with clients doing the whole like, what's your
yeah,
price? Like, and it's even worse now. And I had to come to the determination that, those are our people, unfortunately, that are in it for the money, and they're not my clientele,
yeah,
and I literally had one last year that, was paying us 110K over a variety of the year. And we had a year contract, and 3 months in, I had to be like, man, I'm going to be paying more in therapy than this guy's going to be paying me. I had to, it was
yeah,
hard, but I had to let him go because he
yeah,
was not going to say narcissist, but he was very mean, and he sold wellness products. And so, I mean, to get onto any future points, especially with creativity and branding, like from my perspective, I looked at him like, why would I buy any of your products? Like right now, you're just that type of person that's in it for the money. Who says your products are good? That means you cheap out on your products, you cheap out on your team. You don't actually bring value. And so I think that's a whole demeanor that I like to kind of push forward when I'm talking about my story and how I've become kind of tried to shift through the valley of death period,
mhm,
within an agency where I'm like, hey, it's not about money. It's not about money anymore. I don't have to be seen. I don't have to be heard by all these people out here. It's more about me trying to bring value to a particular audience and wanting to bring value to a particular audience. And value doesn't necessarily need to be money. It can be,
yeah,
that's just an energy. So yes, I could
yeah,
charge less, I could charge more, but really it comes down to the demographics of the people and yourself. And yeah, there's a lot there to unpack, but it is hard, but it's also very satisfying.
yeah, yeah. And like I found over especially in the agency days, because you had that really close relationship with your clients, and like we love our customers today, but honestly, some of them we never ever talk to. They're on the other side of the planet, and they're on their own. They might ask a question here and there on chat. You don't get to meet them really, right? And some we do we get to talk with all the time, which is awesome. But agency days, you're working with people
Yeah.
all the time, and I may have told this story before on this show, but one of our first, like, I started out kind of freelancing, and then I kind of hired someone, and then I got a partner, and then you just start growing, right? And as we started to grow, one of our first sort of, at that time, a substantial client, um, we didn't read the contract. We learned a lot, didn't read the contract very well. Scope creep would have killed us. It would have killed our business. And we had to fire this sort of first kind of biggest client we ever had. And it was the best thing we ever did. And we learned a lot from it. So fortunately, we didn't have to do that very often, but we were just, it's like we were scarred right out of the gate. So we tried to be a little bit more discerning on who we worked with and why and what was in the contract and everything else, because it was just that hard lesson, just it stung us so badly right out of the gate, right?
Yeah, and I think it's not just the branding and creative side. I think it goes for the marketing side as well. I think there's so much out there right now, but the hardest part, I think, with the marketing side that I see is, you know, you always hear online, bring more value, give them more. But from the marketing side, it's really hard for them to see um, tangible results compared to other agencies. And it's
Mm-hmm.
funny to me because like I'll give a client 10x, which is very hard to do because I'll overserve, I'll do stuff, but then they just assume that 10x is common for the price
Yeah.
they're paying. And you have to look back and you have to kind of explain like, hey man, like you made $1 million off of paying me 100. So
Yeah.
like I need to get paid more for doing the
Yeah.
same work. And that's kind of hard to do and ask. And I think
Yeah.
that was part of my burnout was that there's a sense of, over serving, that you have to take a step back on. Hence why a lot of agencies, don't push the boundaries as much. They find a good system. They say, hey, I can give someone 2-3 times the results for this, and that's what we're going to stick at for this price. Because if they don't, then the boundaries aren't set. And next thing you know, you have an 80-20 client that could leave tomorrow, and then you're back to square one.
Yeah. Yeah. And I lived through the kind of 2008 slowdown, and it was a real challenge for us. We had most of our clientele, 70% were government agencies at that point, and suddenly it's like, yeah, those budgets are gone. And so we had to do a transition to all corporate, and we had to do it fast during a time when no one wanted to buy, and somehow maintain operations and everything. And that was also a really formative experience, because then suddenly it's like, especially before that, there was scope creep, but then there was also self-induced scope creep. A creative director would walk over and go, hey, I want to do that. This is really cool. If we did, and we're always like, yeah, that's awesome. Let's do that. That client will be super happy and they'll be excited and we can grow off of it. And, and then fast forward a couple of years and you're like, no, we gotta pay the bills, So suddenly we were looking at like, how much money have we got coming in? What's our sales pipeline like? Are we up to capacity? Do we have a dip in our capacity? All these things that were fundamentals that we learned the hard way. We had to, but I think what it did is we got into, even, I think, in a way, more interesting jobs, but we had a better relationship with our clients. And I think partly it's because we kind of gave it our all, but we didn't go way past and start going, oh, now we're treading water. And now we're like, what do we do? It helped us just kind of pull it together and go, yeah, this is ticking along pretty good, ticking along like a really good machine. We're growing, we're profitable. We've got control over these things, which kept us, I think, sort of calm and in a really good state with our clients. And we could have honest conversations with them because we knew exactly where we were at. And a lot of that experience was what ended up eventually me selling the company and leading to Dryrun, was because I'm like, yeah, this is some important stuff, right? This is just, again, you learn from the burn, not from the good times. It's from the hard times, right?
It is. You learn from the failures, and not just the failures. I actually tell my employees part of our values is grit and perseverance. And so what we usually do is, on our weekly calls, I usually celebrate the failures with my employees, because I'm like, hey, like, you don't want to look down for failing. We want to look at something and how we can improve from the failures. And so I really try to push my employees to mention those failures within what they're doing, so that we can expand and grow and learn new things. I think, though, back to your point with creativity, I think that it's funny because I evolved as a graphic designer. Like, I'm a visual communicator at heart. I love building things. That's where my heart is at. And somehow my business evolved to mostly marketing, and so I'm like a marketer that doesn't get too many creative jobs, and that caused burnout for me because I wasn't getting certain jobs that I really loved. And here's the funny thing, even more, is my biggest challenge with hires has been designers, not because of anything, but the same thing you said earlier, let's do this, let's do that. And there are certain things when you're doing certain things that you're like, hey man, we can't spend 60 hours on a podcast video. Like, I'm sorry. Like, we're not really making income from this. This is really a brand awareness. It's not going to come for a long time. And so trying to teach graphic designers or creative people about the spectrum of like profitability and certain things within hours, I think has always been my biggest challenge when growing my agency.
And that's a massive challenge. And I'm interested to hear that the culture hasn't changed. Like, cause I'm going back quite a while, and you're back in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, and we're hiring designers. And of course, like I have 2 degrees in design. I got a bachelor's and a master's. I taught for a while as just like a sessional instructor, a couple courses a semester sort of thing. And there was a severe lack of, I think, understanding amongst the profession that you are doing commercial work, and that commercial work includes like it has to be profitable.
Yeah.
But it leans so far towards creative communication and creative solution that it starts to lose some of the end goals. And not only, like, I think it's distressing when it's in your own business, but it's also distressing, I think, when that attitude creeps into, you're doing something for a client. That client has to pay their bills, they have to pay their team, they have to
Yes.
pay their staff. It has to be effective for them. And that's not the pinnacle of creative. Sometimes it's effective is what is amazing. That's that amazing solution, right?
Yeah, and it's funny you say that, because I always say I have two types of clients. I have the ones that really want to show off who they are, their leadership, the ones that I actually see become very successful, the ones that care about experience and their audience and stuff like that. And then there's the ones that still think it's just a logo that was made by their nephew, and so there's that premise of, like, you get those clients that come in, they're like, we want all this, we want this and this, and it's like the vice versa of what you're saying, where it's like, but they don't have any foundations. And it's like, well,
Yeah.
like, for us to be more effective for you in the marketing side, you need to have these things nailed down, not just for the amount of hours that we're going to be doing on the marketing side, but because if we don't have these foundations, how are we supposed to complete a vision off of nothing?
Yeah.
And so you have it from both ends. And those clients started to come in, and I started to accept them. And there's that fine line between, hey, do they have enough? Do they understand enough from a business perspective, the importance of experience and design? Or are they just trying to make a quick buck?
Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah, to be effective, it's very holistic. It's like, what problem is this client truly trying to solve, and how can we help them? And where it falls apart is when it becomes very superficial, where it's like, oh, this will look really cool. Yeah, but does it really help them with their goal to communicate to these people for this, that, and the other, right? And it's an interesting challenge that makes the creative industry just another sort of level of difficult and challenging, but also super rewarding, because you can build something you're really proud of. It's not like, I sold a fridge. Okay, it might have been an easier sale, but well, and there's different reasons to be excited about that, but to really create something and that's really effective, I always found exciting.
Yeah, and that's just who I am. I'm a builder. I'm a creative director at heart. So whenever I go out and I'm working with the team, like, I always have to step myself back too and be like, no, maybe only 5-6 hours on this. We can't spend too long on it. And it is. It's like, you look at certain businesses, but I will say, I think that, specifically with the market we're trying to get into, like I told you, we launched GymMark. We're starting to focus on working with leaders in the gym space and helping them get past certain stages. And there's more to design than just graphic design, right? And as you said, what kind of problem are you solving? And so I've always been a big component of the branding side of a business is more than just that logo or the color scheme or the website or the social media platform. Like, those are tools. Those are tools behind the effectiveness of your message, your voice, your authenticity. And so, and a lot of that stuff can only really come out if you have a leadership type mentality. So I always have to go through, when we're dealing with prospects, do they have a leadership type mentality, or are they delegators? Are they not to the point yet where they want to lead? Do they have a vision, or are they just here to be like, hey, we need to make a quick buck. We want to give you $1 for every 10 that you give us in return? Because it's like, those aren't the kind of people I want to work with. I want the people that are trying to make a difference in the world. And so that's what I'm really seeing right now, especially, I mean, you're in SaaS now, but when it comes to like local brick and mortars, for instance, especially gyms, because retention is a huge thing, very similar to your model. Retention is a huge thing for members and gyms. And so, we had the huge crisis a few years ago, and now it's like, all right, well, people don't just want to go to a gym. They don't want to just go to a restaurant. They want an experience. You know, even malls now you're seeing it. You know, there's this huge place down the street where you see it's called like Shields or something. And it's like a huge sporting goods store, and it's like an experience. They have stores in there. They have like restaurants. They have apartments for everything. They have a Ferris wheel. And I'm like, this is where where it's starting to go, because you're starting to keep people in the store longer. And I think that experience and design has a much higher ROI than what most people consider it having. Because you're right. The hardest part with creativity is you can't define an ROI from it. It's just like almost impossible, right? Like you're like, oh, we lost 6 members, but we gained 20, but they all came because they called us. And I'm like, well, are you sure that wasn't because of your positioning that they called you? Not because of because you were found here where they could click a button, you know? So that I think is probably one of the hardest challenges. And I see a lot of I feel like there's a gap in the creative industry where you have the freelancers and the people here at the bottom, and then you have these large agencies like Pentagon and, you know, some of the other ones that are really high up there that are dealing with these large. For you had to deal with going from RFP type systems to dealing with corporate and coming up with a funnel. I was actually thinking about the opposite, because I'm like, there's no way I'm going to be selling value over the internet with the type of audience that I'm trying to bring in.
Yeah. And, you know, like we were, a lot of it, we were like, we weren't pre-internet, but we were early internet, and we never got any jobs off of the web compared to what people get today. We just didn't. We built our business off of, frankly, off of networking, and more networking and more networking, and relationship, building up repeat customers. That's how we did it. That's how we did all of it. Of course, we had a website that people could kind of check us out and probably validate, oh, it's a real business. But that was kind of it at the time. So it has changed. It has changed quite a bit. I think there's other opportunities, but it's just added more challenges in some ways too, right? Like,
go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask you about that. Like, I was going to ask you about like how you've blend all of that, because, you know, you're still selling to people and it's still relationships, but you got this engine thing kind of used too, right?
Yeah, I think, and that's funny you say that, because that's exactly what I was going to go about. I mean, you remember 2008, 2010. That's when Web 3.0 came out. That's like was the time when everyone's like, oh, we don't want print anymore. We just want to go for web, and we just want to do everything online. And now I think we're at the point where, because back then print started to become more luxurious, you know, not too many people were doing it. Kind of has gone a little bit back to where it was back then. But now I think that's kind of happening in what you were just talking about. I get a lot of clients calling me, or prospects that just want, like, we just want leads. Just bring us 100 leads. And I have to be like, you know, that's not sustainable. Like, I mean, it's not hard to get leads. It really isn't. I can buy a list for $10 of 100 leads for you right now, and you're not going to get any business from it. You know, and so that's just that was actually a pretty good example of how easy it is to get leads if you really wanted to get leads. And I get clients like that and prospects. And I think the problem right now is marketing fatigue. So many people, there's so many different avenues you can go. I hear people all the time tell me like, oh, well, how do you market on YouTube? I want to do YouTube, and I want to do Facebook, and I want to do LinkedIn, and I want to do, how do you create an email list? And it's like, dude, just pick one or two, find the ones that are effective. And I promise you, especially, and this is an interesting story. So and this will lead up to what we're talking about. I had a landscaper come over the other day, because we're building a playhouse for my kids, and he got referred to me by my grandma-in-law, and did some work for her. And we were just talking, and he owns a small landscaping company here. And he's like $100,000. He's very small. He does a lot of the work on his own still. He's like, yeah, I've worked in marketing, and I had a couple people tell me I need to go social media, or I need to build a website. And I'm like, dude, like, you're making $100K a year. Social media is worthless to you right now. Yes, it's good to go out there and show videos and stuff, but you don't need to hire $4,000 a month agency, $10,000 a month agency. You can't even afford that, for one. But two, you don't stop thinking about that. Focus on referrals. Like, referrals and community is back to what I was originally saying, is kind of coming back. I think
Yep.
that people want to build a community. They want to build like-minded people. That's how we should see social media. And in general, more so than transactional as it is now. And that's the
Mhm.
way it should be. And when it comes to gyms in particular, you know, I think people are thriving to get out of the house. I think people don't want to work
Yeah.
out from home anymore. They want to go and find a community of people that they can work on their mental health and their physical health, and they need to find the right people to do so. And the only way
Mhm.
you're going to build that experience is if you, as a leader within the organization that you're working at, if you're a gym, if anything else, people do judge a book by its cover. Unfortunately, they do. And like you said
Mhm.
earlier, they want to know we're a real business. So they just look to see if we have a website. Now it's like so many people can get websites for free or build a logo from just having someone they know that understands paint, So
Mhm.
uh, you literally have to separate yourself in the way you do your creativity and your graphics and the experiences. I like to say it's more about the experiences you provide and making sure they work with the demo that you're trying to work with. That's how you can kind of
Yep.
put a KPI on creativity, right?
Yeah, it like you said, you can't do it by how many people walked in the door today, but I think you can look back after, each quarter or over a year and say, yeah, we've sort of transformed. We've been getting better quality prospects in. We've been getting we have been increasing this, that. It's kind of a holistic thing, and I don't think $1 billion companies can't properly point to attribution,
They can't.
and figure out where it comes from. So there's just some trust in that. Yeah, it's you're building, and like you said, an experience. Like um, it's so much of is what's old is new again, right? And you were talking about like the malls. Like you can see it. It's like at one point it's like every mall is going to shut down.
Mhm.
No, probably half of them shut down because they lacked any bit of interesting experience. But then the other ones that nailed it or they're absolute, like they've nailed it down. Like
Mhm.
they are an experience. It's not shopping. It's also eating and entertainment and everything else involved in it. And it's become part of the community, and they're busy. Some
And
people just get it
trying, I
right.
mean, just a rough example is, you know, I want to try a shirt on. I want to try shoes on. I remember I went shopping a couple of weeks ago with me and my wife and my kids, and I needed to update my wardrobe. I'm not, I'm a designer at heart. So it's like, I don't like wearing other brands because I'm like, why am I
Yeah.
paying you to wear your brand? It doesn't make sense to me. So I like, like very plain, kind of simplistic style guy. And so I was looking
Yeah.
at some shoes. I haven't bought shoes in years, and they had this pair that I really liked. And I tried them on there, and unfortunately they were out. So then I did have to go buy them on Amazon because they were out.
Yeah.
But I would have bought them there. But that's really what it comes down to, right? It's like you have these experiences that I'd rather spend an hour going and driving to a store and having time with my friends and my family and possibly eating and then finding some clothes that I can actually try on and no fit
Yeah.
instead of sit in my house. And so it goes back. I mean, we don't have to get too far in depth with this, but it goes back into, people that want to, from the corporate world, that want to work from home. It's like, believe me, you do it for 3 years and you're not going to love it as much as you think you'll love it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's you have to balance it out. Like we've been a remote team. My team's sort of scattered around, been remote since before COVID. We built the company remote, which was weird at the time. Everyone
Mhm.
thought we were weird, and all of a sudden, overnight, suddenly, no, we're not weird, and it's easier to meet with people because they know what Zoom is now. But you have to do, sort of deal with things differently. You have to get out. You have to be outside. You have to
Mhm.
be out in the world. And I'll tell you, like the there was that time where it was, we lived off of Uber Eats for how long? And now I'm like, I can't even feel like we want to be out because
Yeah.
you want that experience. We want to be out in a restaurant with people in the community and the owners, because we love supporting like little independent restaurants and shops and all of that. And you want to be out and have that experience and give them my money directly, not have the middleman taking all the money from me either, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's changing, right? And it's nice to see like it's coming back. There's challenges for small business right now, of course, but it's coming back and there's opportunity there, which is nice to see.
Well, I think the biggest challenge for me, because I was fully remote too. I do have a couple people here in the Phoenix area. They are part of my team. I have some in California. I used to have some in Florida, but I've kind of dropped that area to kind of try to stay in the same time zone, at least somewhat, for my team. But it's culture. I think that's the hardest thing I've had to come along with when it comes to building a team. I want them to go out. I want them to have fun. In fact, I personally tell them, like, hey, if you're having a burnout day, go take a free day. Go out and get back to hiking, get back to doing something that you love to do so that you can not have so much burnout so fast. But that building that culture from an online perspective is a challenge. It's definitely a challenge to build that compared to when you're sitting in an office. You can go back and forth, and some of those small things, some of those small changes and fixes, like you and I were talking before the call, like man, if we were in an office, I could just walk down to him right now and say, can you fix this? And they would fix it,
Yeah. It is a challenge, and we found too, like we've had some really big wins with sort of the team we've been building. We've also had some people that just didn't work out, and it wasn't the right environment for them. And we learned a lot, and they probably learned a lot too, of what works for them and what works for us. And it's hard, and it's you got to nurture it and have it, because like I remember back in the agency days, it's like we had a foosball table and we had a dartboard and there were ping pong tables out in the common area. And like, I think our productivity was affected more by ping pong than anything, but it was a different, but there was just a different thing. It was people and they're around and they're doing stuff, and there was energy, and it was just a different feel. And so now you try and replicate as much as you can online and all that, but it's not the same, but you also have a lot of benefits that come with it, and you just balance it out as best you can.
Yeah, definitely. I always tell my employees, I'm like, hey, like if you need to take time off in the middle of the day to do something, do it. Just make sure you're getting your hours in, So
Exactly.
if you need to, I prefer you to, if you're like, especially for designers, because they're mostly night owls. I'm like, if you want to work at night, great. But make sure you're around during times that we need to talk about certain things. Because if not, then it's going to take us days to get something done that could take us, 10 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. And there's that when you get the right, like I said, the right culture, that's what I find is that that just sort of works, like it's flexible, but people put in, like, get stuff done, and they're engaged, but they have that freedom. And I think when you get the right balance and the right culture and the right team, it just kind of works. And then when it's not the right fit, it just breaks. It just totally breaks. So it's a lot of hard lessons even for us through COVID, of just making sure that as we expand the team again, we just have to be just very careful to make sure it's the right culture fits and the right, just for everyone's success, right? And that's a challenge. It's kind of scary to think about again, right?
Yeah, it is. It's funny because I see a lot of people, especially in my space of working with leaders in the gym space. You do see a lot of these brick and mortar people that are like, oh, so much weight is on their shoulders. I mean, very similar to us still in doing an online business, but they have more expenses, right? They have a facility or they have a location they have to pay for, which is pretty hiked up in price right now. They have so much stuff they have to pay for that they're like, I just want to open an online business and go back to be making a certain amount of profits, making a little bit more profits. And yeah, that's a good thing. I mean, there's nothing wrong if you want to do that, but I feel the opposite. I'm like, man, I'll go out and pay $4,000 a month just so I can get out of the house for 6 hours a day and be more productive, because it's so easy. No matter how much you try with the experiences around you, build your office, build a podcast room, whatever it is in your house, you're going to come to a point where you're like, I'm going to be more productive out of going to do things that don't involve work, because it's going to help me get out of work, be creative, think better, do better.
Yeah, you have to have those outlets. Like I've been, especially since working remotely, have been tried to be very disciplined on that. Like your head never shuts off. Like your brain, it's really hard to shut off an entrepreneur's brain, or at least for me. but I try and draw some lines where it's like end of day and evening, something different. Weekends, we're out on our bikes. We're doing like, just, you need that mental break, that mental space, and that physical uh, rewards and that from sitting in a chair all the time. You have to do that to be able to do this long term and have that longevity. But I also know what it does is when I get down to the office, like I sprint, like it's, you sprint and it's like a barely sucking 5 minute lunch kind of thing. And then you're back. And I'm not even saying that's the best thing. Like, but I do find that I think because of that, I'm not trying to do an 80-hour work week, but what I am is like pretty bloody efficient every single day. Like I don't seem to have a lot of that lag. Like I can just go, but I think that's because I put a wall, like I get away from it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that can be very hard from home. And I had to learn a very similar thing. And I think that was a determination for me. What actually, I'm just happy I found it when I did. Cause you see a lot of people that are making 8 million a year, 10 million a year, 20 million a year. And they're miserable, and I'm just happy that I found it at the stage I'm at where it's like, hey, like I need to bring my personal time back, because it is easy to get caught in that grind. It's very easy to get caught in the grind and think that you have to work 80-hour weeks because everyone says hustle culture is what's going to get you there. And from my perspective, I've just tended to notice, no, I'm more of time efficiency. I'm more work smart. I'd rather work 32 solid hours a week, maybe 40, depending if I'm doing a speaking gig or I'm doing something else. But just being able to go out and have my own time, go back to the gym, go for my runs like I love to do, hang out with be present around my family, like those things really like help solidify, because there's a huge thing that says, oh, you have to love what you do. You have to love what you do. And everyone thinks, oh, I have to be in love with what I do. And I think it's an American culture thing that thinks that you have to be 100% in love with what you do. It's like, no, I love what I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't enjoy it. But that doesn't mean that I don't need a break and I want to do other things, because I will get burnt out. If I love pizza and I eat 10 pizzas a day, believe me, I'm going to hate it after a week. Right. So just kind of, for most, I would think that would happen. But yeah.
It's love what you do. Just do lots of different stuff. Like that's the thing. Like, and I think that's really important. And we've seen that, especially during COVID, and that like the mental stress and damage that can happen when people are just, they don't have that relief. They don't have that break. They don't have the mental break. They don't have other interests or things to help them stay healthy. It's a lead to a big healthcare crisis, I think. And I'm hoping that as things have sort of settled down and more people are like getting back to the office, maybe partly, and getting back to the coffee shops and the gym and on outside and on the bikes, that I think that it starts to hopefully reduce some of that 80-hour a week sprint, because there was nothing else to do.
I was telling my wife yesterday, I was talking to you earlier about the landscaper guy that came over. I was like, honey, I'm thinking of when he comes to work, because I've been refurbishing the kids' playhouse. We bought a house; it was a playhouse, and then the last people that owned the house turned it into a dog house, and it went to crap, and they put up a fence and all this crap. And I got to a point where I'm like, I need, part of me like working on myself more. It's like I wanted to get out more. I wanted to do some stuff, and I'm not great at doing that type of stuff, but I'm a creator at heart, so I love just getting out, not thinking, and doing that kind of stuff. And I was telling her, I'm like, I think I'm going to ask him if I can help him. I'll pay him the same amount. I just manual labor, like I'll get out there and I'll help him with it, because you do, and it's kind of like Office Space, right? The movie Office Space, when he's in the office and then at the end he likes to still go out and do some of that stuff. And I think that that's part of, I think that's I've seen a correlation with that type of stuff, especially within the Valley of Death period, personally, where you start going, oh, this is why mental like health and people talking about time tracking and you know, all the stuff that has to do with the mental health side of things. This is why it's so important. This is the stuff.
Mhm.
And when you're smaller, you think it's a ruse, but when you start getting bigger, you're like,
Yeah.
oh wait, this is what defines success right here. This is what's going to help me grow, is those
Yeah.
KPIs. And so I look at taking time out to journal. I bought a Remarkable just because it was like, oh, I still want to write, but I didn't, you know, I'm a creative, so I get notebooks. I don't, you know, organize it. And so I'm like, I'm gonna get a Remarkable. I'm gonna, you know, write my notes down instead of type them every day. I stopped wearing my iWatch because I wanted to stop looking at the time, which has been a huge benefit for me. And just
Yeah.
going out to the gym more and working out more, I think is, and that's what led me. That's kind of what led me to find my audience, I think, a little bit more, because I, you know, for about 6-7 years, I was, and with Creative in the business that we still have, but we're kind of focusing much more on the larger projects like the RFPs and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Is I was like, you know what, these are my people. Like the people at the gym are my people. Like it
Yeah.
finally hit me that, and I had a few gyms that we were already working with, and so I was like, oh, all right, I think it's time for me to niche down and kind of make it, try to push it to the next level with just a few services and see what I can do to help these gym owners. And so that's where GymMark kind of evolved from, which was the years of pain points and struggles and finding
Mhm.
the right mix of services for a certain type of leader in the gym space.
Well, and this was a really good transition, because I actually wanted to talk with you a little bit about GymMark and how, like, who you're helping now and how are you helping them, and because if there's some gym owners, I know there's people out there that might not own a gym, but they all know somebody that owns a gym.
Mhm.
I know we've talked so much about building those experiences and everything. If you just talk a little bit to that, like what you do at GymMark and how you're different and how you can help them evolve their business.
Yeah, definitely. Well, first off, we try not to work with the I try not to work with the gyms that are under 500K. Usually that's stage 2, validation stage, as you're aware. I think
Mhm.
validation stage, you know, back to the marketing fatigue perspective, I saw a lot of gyms going down the route of what they think would lead to success, which was, hey, I need to hire 80 sales reps, and this, I'm over exaggerating, but do a bunch of Facebook ads, get a bunch of traffic, cold call a whole bunch of people, and that's how I'm going to get my business. But you know, there comes a time, I think the evolution of every business, where you go, hey, it's not really about bringing in the leads anymore, which is still important.
Yeah.
I think anyone, like I said earlier, can bring in leads. I think it's about building a culture, building an experience, and building a community. And so
Yeah.
we work with gyms at around stage 3, 4, and 5, which is, you know, the 500K to a million. They're kind of at that point where they're ready to make it to that next stage, start to build that experience out. We can kind of help them start building a sustainable lead flow with warm marketing tactics. And so we do a lot of reputation management. We'll help with provide creating that experience for them. And so we'll do a lot of that type of stuff for them. And then stage 4 and 5, which are either the franchises, which is stage 5, or the gym owners that are between 1 and 5 million that are like, we need to expand. We're ready to
Mhm.
replicate what we've learned. And that's usually, I got that from the healthy metrics of gyms. Like that's
Yeah.
usually the stage that people should expand, is if for a gym is when they're at a million. But really helping them build a sustainable lead flow. And we do that through our 3-step process. You know, we focus on the visual positioning side, the experience sharing side, which is, hey, how does your offline and online presence feel slash sound compared to when you're in the gym? So we want to make that a consistency amongst that. So the positioning, the experience, and then the reputation management to help not just have you be found much easier by your positioning and the people that you want to find you, but also have them start becoming advocates for you. You know, let
Yeah.
them start
Yeah.
being the ones that start bringing in more people for you, and we'll help them in the marketing and the branding side. And I think that's what really makes us different. We don't really focus on hey, we're just going to do some Facebook ads and bring you 100 leads. It's more like, no, we want to help you grow a culture internally and externally. We want to work with leadership, and we want to start building this messaging and this voice and starting to position you in a way where you can start bringing in more of a community instead of just a whole bunch of gym goers that, probably will raise your churn rate even more, because retention's probably your main metric you should be watching at that point. And so that's really what GymMark's all about. We have 3 different offers, 3 different methods that we kind of do depending on the size of your gym. I'm very big on, I understand, like I said earlier, how do you contribute the best way you can? And so I really focus heavily on, hey, I know the statistics say, and you're in finance, so you would know this, that, hey, you're a brick and mortar, 10% should go to marketing. So we found a good number, positioned ourselves correctly for each audience size of their gym, and came up with services around stuff that we've already done that work for those types of businesses. So, we do have this 3-step method. And what we're telling everyone right now is we have a free private podcast. I kind of go through a series of 3 podcasts, about 15 minutes a piece. And if anyone wants to go through that and listen and how they can start building that sustainable lead flow in just 5 minutes a day, go ahead and head on over to leavethatmark.com and listen to the private podcast.
And that's awesome. So that's the best place for them to find you, leavethatmark.com?
Yes. I would say head on over to leavethatmark.com, listen to that podcast, and, maybe we'll talk after that.
That's awesome. Well, this has been a great conversation, Zach. I love talking with creatives, and it brings me back to my agency days. And there's some things I, miss from that, because it was a really cool place to be in, a really fun world. Thanks so much for joining me today. And thanks everyone for joining us. And if you'd like to figure out what you're doing in your finances, understand your finances, talk about your finances with your team, your cash flow, your sales pipeline, everything else, come visit us at dryrun.com and we'll get you all set up. And I think we can help you out. Thanks, Zach. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.